Hi. What we're going to discuss today is a little bit different. Not the sort of classic idea from the Parsha, nor really the classic idea from Rav Hirsch in Charev. What I want to discuss is something more present. I want to discuss a conversation I had with someone who was lamenting the fact that young people, Talmidim, our children, lack the language of mission, don't speak about Judaism as a mission or purpose. And I thought that was strange because they do. But then on further reflection, I realized they really don't. And to explain what I mean. Now, I've been immersed in Rav Hirsch's framework for a very long time, so I take certain things for granted, that there is an articulate mission of Judaism, that there is a reason why we are here. But then when I thought back to my yeshiva days, there was a language of mission, but it was very specific in the area of Olam Haba. That was the purpose. The goal was getting Olam Haba, as much Olam Haba as possible. And that got me thinking that there is something about Rav Hirsch's warning to us that mission is the solution. And to break it down, Rav Hirsch repeatedly, throughout his commentary, talks about two existential dangers that exist in the human experience, that of determinism and that of materialism or reductionism, that the world is just dead matter. And these are two sort of contradictory experiences. The world in front of me seems dead, but I feel like a free agent. And there's a tension there. There's a tension there for ancient man, and there's a tension there for modern man. And what is the solution? Now, that's the laying out the problem. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about the solution from a secular standpoint, and then talk about how within our religious experience, people try and give a solution, but accepting the vocabulary of the problem, not leaning into the problem, not accepting the tension, but trying to either deny or distract. So let's talk about it within the secular context, and then we'll move it to the religious world. In a secular context, what are we talking about? Well, I've got this tension. The world is dead, but I am a meaning-seeking being. The world is fully controlled by the gods, but I am free. I feel like I am a free-seeking agent. What does ancient man do? Ancient man talks about polytheistic fatalism. The gods decide my fate. I have no free will. I have no agency. My fate is up to the gods. The gods are in control of the world. The gods control the stars, the rain. Modern man, how does modern man deal with this tension? Well, modern man has perhaps a new solution. Modern man either goes down the directive of determinism through an evolutionary lens, through a scientific physics lens, that there is no human agency, so you get rid of the tension by denying one of the legs of this problem, or you can distract. You can distract by sort of ignoring the problem, by covering it up. We do this with consumerism. We do this with buying things. We do this with sort of, how would you best call it? Hedonic distraction. A certain hedonism, that you distract yourself from those bigger questions. That is the secular approach to these problems. The way a philosopher once put it is, we have a worldview, but we have an ontological hole in it. The world is dead, the world is just material, the world is just molecules in motion, but I, as an individual, are free. I think, I experience, what space is there for a living subject in a, so to speak, dead universe? So either they get rid of one of the problems by owning determinism. That's the more philosophical approach or the scientific approach. But then the common man's approach will be to distract himself with consumerism, distract himself with buying things. And these solutions sort of deal with the problem. You either get rid of one or you ignore it. But what does the religious world do? And I think the religious world does a parallel move. The religious world, on some level, which I like to call nihilism in a Talis, is where we make God do everything. We don't deny free will outright. We just make God everywhere. We make God do everything. We speak in the language that Hashem is controlling every aspect of my life. Hashem is completely part of my life. The people in front of me are orchestrated by God for me to learn something from them. And everything is so minutely orchestrated by God. But by the end of it, there is no you left. We use this in language when we talk about that it's a divine decree. Hashem decided it. Now, I'm not saying that we take Hashem out of our lives, God forbid. But if we use this sort of language the whole time, and we wonder at the end of it why our children and our students are going to be like, what do you mean higher purpose? That I could do in relationship to the Almighty? I mean, how arrogant. What am I even doing anyway? To the extent where, in the yeshiva world, definitely the yeshivas I went to, language of actively doing something in the world was at best a a concession to our weakness. Hishtadlus was at best a concession or a knas you paid, but wasn't actually fundamentally meaningful. You weren't actually doing anything in the world because Hashem was really creating the world constantly, and you weren't involved, and your free will was relegated to a really tiny, perhaps something on the level of the soul. Now, obviously, people don't take such an extreme view. Some people take more of extreme views and talk about bittul and talk about us being within God and us being just an expression of God. What happens at the end of this? What happens at the end of this is that you have no meaning. If you don't have significance, if you don't play a real part, then you have no meaning. You're ending with nihilism. You're accepting the language of the problem and you're going down the deterministic route, but you're using religious language. So it sounds profound, but if you are God and you are bittul, the ideal is for you to be bittul to God, and God really is doing everything, you're doing nothing, in which case you are not significant, in which case you can't talk about mission. Mission becomes pointless. Like, what does that even mean in a real way? And the second option is the distraction option. How? Well, rather than talking about buying a handbag, we talk about Olam Haba. We talk about the gold coins you're going to collect in the next world. This is sort of narcissism with a Herscher. The idea that you are all about yourself, building your palace in Olam Haba, building your schar in Olam Haba. Everything's about Olam Haba, the mitzvahs you do, the words of Torah you learn, to the extent that yeshivas will have on the wall numbers per mitzvah, per schar. Now you have the illusion of mission, but that also is not a mission. That's narcissism. That's just about you. You're just a better investor. So that distracts from the problem. And once again, you don't feel the need to talk about mission because you have mission. Even Mashiach is going to just be a way of getting things better for me. Never in the universal sense. Never in the universal sense that there is an active mission for a Jew to accomplish in this world, that Judaism has a purpose and the mitzvahs in the Torah are living towards that purpose, and the rest of the world also has a role to play in this. You don't get higher purpose or higher mission. Now, I recognize the criticism to this framework. Well, nobody does any of these extremes. Of course not. My point is presenting you could call a diagnostic tool that allows us to look at things and see where we stand and see where we are along the spectrum. How close are we to being a determinist, to the point where we don't look at meaning as being fundamental? Rav Hirsch's solution was showing how mitzvahs in the Torah, be it from shchita to taking challah erev Shabbos, to washing your hands in the morning, were forcing you to emphasize your free agency and your free will, to the point where it was looking at the world as being a place of meaning, symbolism, of a way of talking to you about how to act in the world and live out your mission. The world became vibrant, enchanted almost, because there was a narrative that you were taking part in. Judaism had a perspective, and that's what Hirsch developed, to use the language of mission. So when people say, is Judaism a missionary religion? We say no. What do you mean no? Missionary just means mission. Yes, we don't try and convert people, but we are on a mission. Do you have a ministry? Well, ministry just means service. This is the language Rav Hirsch would use to encourage people to have an orientation to Judaism, that it was a flag that you wanted to and you were proud to hold. So we have to be more comfortable with this language. And once again, nobody takes any of these extremes, and to a certain extent, there's a certain caricature there. A person going to say, well, no, obviously free will is important. Yes, but if you spend your whole time talking about how God is really doing everything, and the more religious person is able to see that more, and your action, if you really believed, you would realize it's insignificant, well, then you lose purpose in the process. And in the language of being spiritual, you become a nihilist. So, Rav Hirsch often speaks about the solution, but more than that, he warns us about the dangers of two fundamental concepts that are in tension in our experience: reductionism and determinism. And so much of Judaism is warning us against these two, and the danger of the modern world, or how best to put it, us accepting the language of the modern world as a solution. Either getting rid of one of the problems, you're not free, so there's no tension there. The world is carrying on, you're not free, but using spiritual language to make it more palatable. Yes, you've dealt with the solution, but you've also lost meaning in the process. Or the perspective of distraction. It's all about Olam Haba. And once again, obviously Olam Haba is part of the story, but if you spend your entire time talking about it and you wonder why young people don't know how to talk about Judaism in the language of mission because, to talk about the language of mission, they'd ask you, well, how much schar do I get for that? Now, once again, these are extreme expressions, but they're a tool for us to reflect on where we stand and where our children stand into these ideas. As always, have a wonderful week and a wonderful Shabbos.